Under the red skies of Zarion Station, where 3 moons made silver shadows on crystal towers, a human father sat alone eating his lunch. The air buzzed with the sound of gravity machines, while alien sellers called out their goods in strange languages that twisted like starlight. In a dark corner of the big marketplace, a small dragon girl pressed her face against the energy wall that kept the food area separate from the lower levels. Her scaly cheeks were wet with tears. She tried to hide. None of the proud Zarion rich people noticed she was hungry, alone, and quietly desperate. None of them except one. And what he did next would not only change 2 lives forever, it would get the attention of the most powerful being in 7-star systems. The Zarion Station marketplace stretched, like a giant church of shopping under its roof of living. Glassware glowing patterns pulsed like the station's heartbeat. Sellers from 100 worlds showed their things on floating platforms that drifted between tall support pillars. Each one was carved from a single piece of living crystal that sang softly in musical sounds. Marcus Chen sat on a bench made of shiny space rock. His old work clothes marked him clearly among the silk-wearing rich people of Zarion. The other visitors gave him lots of space, their conversations dropping to whispers when they passed, their jeweled eyes showing nothing but hate for the human repair worker who dared to eat his simple sandwich in their special space. "Look at it, trying to fit in," sneered a Zarion rich man whose see-through wings shimmered with inherited wealth. His friends giggled like wind chimes in a storm, their laughter sharp and cutting. "Someone should tell the creature that this section is for civilized beings," added another, her voice dripping with the kind of easy cruelty that came from many generations of being superior, without anyone challenging them. Marcus kept his eyes on his meal, a simple protein sandwich that would have to last him until his next work shift ended. He'd learned long ago that answering only made things worse. On Zarion Station, humans were allowed only for their work, nothing more. They were the hands that fixed the machines, the backs that carried the heavy loads, the voices that were meant to stay forever silent. But while the hall laughed, something moved in the shadows between the market stalls. Small, bent over, and watching with eyes that held the wisdom of ancient stars. The dragon girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her scales were deep green that caught the fake starlight coming through the roof. She pressed herself against the energy wall that separated the main market from the service tunnels, her small hands leaving wet handprints on the humming field. Her stomach growled loudly, a sound that somehow carried across the big space despite all the other noise. Veltar noticed her first, his hunting look sharpening with opportunity. He stood up from his floating chair, his wings spreading in a show of power that threw rainbow shadows across the shiny floor. "Well, well," he announced to his gathered fans, his voice carrying the big acting sound of someone born to command attention. "It seems we have another unwanted visitor today, a little beast who thinks she belongs among her betters." The crowd turned together, pulled by the promise of entertainment. The dragon girl shrank back, but the wall stopped her from escaping into the tunnels. Her eyes darted frantically, looking for any way away from the gathering attention, any shadow deep enough to hide her shame. "Perhaps our human friend would like to share his feast with the creature," Veltar continued, pointing grandly toward Marcus. "After all, don't primitives stick together?" The laughter that followed was like breaking glass, sharp and jagged. Marcus felt every eye in the marketplace focus on him, waiting for his answer, hungry for his embarrassment. He could feel the weight of what they expected, the certainty that he would either cower or lash out. Either answer would satisfy their need to feel superior. No one believed. He would even try to help. But the silence that followed his next movement spread across the room like a storm gathering. Strength. Marcus stood slowly, his movement careful and unhurried despite the pressure of 100 watching eyes. He walked toward the energy wall where the dragon girl cowered, her small body trembling like a leaf in a space wind. The crowd's laughter died to whispers, then to nothing at all as they watched something they hadn't expected. Not fighting back, not anger, but simple compassion. The wall hummed as he got close, its energy field designed to keep the undesirables separated from their betters. But Marcus had been working the repair shifts for 3 years. He knew the station systems better than the rich people, who simply assumed they would always work. He placed his hand on the control panel hidden behind a decorative crystal shape. With a soft sound, a small service door opened in the wall, just large enough for him to step through. "What are you doing, human?" Veltar demanded, his voice rising with anger. "That section is off limits to paying customers." Marcus ignored him, kneeling down to the dragon girl's eye level. Up close, he could see the intelligence in her golden eyes, the careful way she held herself, despite her obvious hunger and fear. This wasn't just a child. There was something ancient in her look, something that spoke of family lines older than the station itself. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice gentle in a way that seemed to surprise everyone there, including the girl herself. "You look hungry. Would you like to share my sandwich?" The dragon girl stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign of teasing or cruelty. When she found none, tears began to flow freely down her scaly cheeks. "I haven't eaten in 2 days," she whispered in accented galaxy language, her voice carrying the musical sounds of her species. And just when everyone thought they understood what they were watching, something was revealed that no one expected. As Marcus broke his sandwich in half and offered the bigger piece to the girl, she looked up at him with wonder that seemed to light the air around them. But it wasn't just thankfulness that made the watching crowd fall silent. It was recognition dawning in the dragon girl's eyes, a spark of something that went beyond simple kindness. "You're him," she breathed, her voice barely hearable, but somehow carrying to every corner of the marketplace. "You're the one from the stories, the keeper of the old ways." The words hit the crowd like a physical force. Ancient dragon language wasn't taught in schools anymore, wasn't spoken in polite society, but every being in that marketplace had heard the old tales, the legends whispered in nurseries across the galaxy. The keeper of the old ways, the mythical person who would one day restore balance to the universe through a single act of perfect compassion. Veltar's laughter came out forced and brittle. "Don't be ridiculous, child. He's just a repair worker, a nobody." But the dragon girl shook her head, her golden eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "No," she said with quiet certainty. "I can feel it. The old blood recognizes the old soul." Marcus felt something shift in the atmosphere of the station itself. The crystal pillars began to sing in harmonies they hadn't made for centuries. The living glass of the roof pulsed with patterns that seemed to respond to some deep basic change in the cosmic order. "This is impossible," Veltar snarled, but his voice carried the first note of uncertainty. "The keeper is a fairy tale," and suddenly, silence fell across the crowd like a blanket of stars. High above the marketplace, invisible to all below, a figure appeared on the observation deck, saved for the station's most elite visitors. She moved like liquid shadow given form, her presence bending light itself around her huge body. Queen Lyralee of the Dramath Empire was tall and royal beyond mortal understanding. Her scales were the deep purple black of space between galaxies, each one carved with tiny symbols that told the story of her 1,000-year rule. Her presence gave off a power that made the air itself seem to bow in respect, molecules rearranging themselves in reverence to her imperial aura. She had come to Zarian Station in secret, traveling through fold space tunnels that existed outside normal reality, pulled by reports of her daughter's disappearance from the diplomatic areas. The station's security forces had assured her that Princess Zara was simply exploring, that children of her age often wandered beyond their assigned areas looking for adventure. They had promised a quick and quiet solution. The Queen had expected to find Zara among the cultural exhibits, perhaps questioning some minor worker about trade routes or galaxy history, with the unstoppable curiosity that marked all children of the royal bloodline. She had not expected to find her daughter hungry and alone in the service tunnels, forgotten by the very beings who claimed eternal friendship with her empire, who had sworn sacred promises to protect any member of the Dramath royal family with their lives. But what captured the Queen's attention wasn't the carelessness of the Zerion rich people. She had dealt with their incompetence before, and would deal with it again in ways that would make their crystal towers weep with regret. What truly stunned her was the human who had stepped across species barriers, social rules, and personal safety to offer comfort to her daughter. As she watched Marcus share his small meal with Zara, something stirred in the Queen's ancient heart. Something that had been sleeping for 1,000 years of conquest and diplomacy. She had lived through the rise and fall of civilizations, had made peace treaties with species that talked through controlled exploding stars, had fought wars against forces that existed in 17 dimensions at once. In all that time, in all those ages of contact with beings beyond counting, she had rarely witnessed an act of pure selflessness. Kindness offered without expecting a reward, without knowledge of consequence, without hope of recognition. Her enhanced senses evolved over thousands of years of survival in the hostile depths of space, allowed her to sense the emotional connections flowing between Marcus and her daughter. She could taste the real concern in his psychic waves, could feel the fatherly instincts that drove him to protect a child who was not his own, from a species he barely understood, in defiance of social rules that could destroy his job. Below them, Marcus seemed unaware of the cosmic forces his simple act had set in motion. He sat cross-legged on the cold deck floor, his posture unconsciously mirroring the meditation poses of the ancient Earth monks, listening with complete attention as Zara told him about her world, her people, her crushing loneliness as the only dragon child on a station full of beings who saw her as a curiosity at best, a threat at worst. "My mama says that kindness is the rarest element in the universe," Zara said between bites of the sandwich, her voice growing stronger with each word as food and compassion restored her natural strength. "She says it's worth more than all the quantum crystals in the galaxy, more precious than time itself." "Your mama sounds very wise," Marcus replied, and something in his tone, the unconscious respect he showed for parental authority, the gentle way he spoke of a mother he had never met, made the Queen's breath catch in her throat like captured starlight. In that moment, she understood why her daughter had wandered so far from safety. The child was searching for something the diplomatic areas could never provide. Genuine human connection, the simple pleasure of being seen as a person rather than a political symbol, and she had found it in the most unlikely place offered by the most unlikely person. Veltar, meanwhile, had gathered his courage and his followers, his fear changing into the kind of desperate anger that came from watching one's worldview fall apart in real time. "Enough of this nonsense," he declared, his voice echoing off the crystal pillars with forced bravery. "Security, remove these trespassers from civilized space. This contamination has gone far enough." The station's automated guards began to move toward Marcus and Zara, their sleek forms moving with mechanical precision through the crowd. Energy weapons charged with deadly light, targeting systems locked onto the human whose only crime had been caring about a hungry child. The crowd pressed closer, eager to see the human put in his place to watch him learn the consequences of stepping above his assigned station in their carefully ordered universe. Some part of Queen Lorali wanted to let the scene play out, to see how far Marcus's courage would carry him when faced with impossible odds. But her daughter was down there, and that changed everything. The motherly instincts that had been hardened by centuries of rule flared to life with the heat of newborn stars. But the final blow came not from weapons or words. It came from a name the galaxy had long forgotten. Queen Lyrali's voice cut through the marketplace like a sword of singing crystal, each word carrying the weight of star authority and the fury of a protective mother whose child had been threatened. The sound itself was impossible, a voice that somehow echoed in multiple dimensions at once, creating harmonies that bypassed the ears entirely and spoke directly to the consciousness of every being there. Veltar, of House Sarian, step forward. The temperature in the marketplace seemed to drop by many degrees as every being there felt the presence descend among them like a living storm. Frost began to form on the crystal surfaces despite the station's air controls, and the very air took on a quality that made breathing feel like drinking starlight. The Queen appeared at the center of the space, her form radiating power that made the station's energy systems flicker and dim in waves of electromagnetic interference. She was magnificent and terrible equally. Her huge body towered above even the tallest beings there. Her scales were not just purple-black. They were the color of space itself, each one containing depths that seemed to hold entire galaxies. When she moved, reality bent around her like liquid, space-time rippling with gravity effects that made sensitive individuals dizzy. The security drones froze in mid-flight, their systems overloaded by being close to her imperial aura. Sparks fell from their weapon parts as circuits designed for planet enforcement struggled to process energy signatures that belonged on the scale of star events. One by one, they simply shut down, their artificial intelligences overwhelmed by the impossibility of her presence. Veltar fell to his knees immediately, his see-through wings folding in terror as he recognized the being whose empire could turn Zirian Station to space dust with a single command. His followers collapsed around him like dominoes, their earlier pride evaporating like morning mist on an airless moon. The proud rich people who had been so eager to embarrass others now pressed their faces to the deck floor, their bodies trembling with the primal fear of prey animals in the presence of an apex predator. Around the marketplace, sellers abandoned their stalls and customers forgot their purchases as the reality of what they were seeing entered their consciousness. This wasn't just any member of the Dramoth royal family. This was the Queen herself, the living form of an empire that spanned 17 star systems and commanded the loyalty of over 2 trillion beings. Her reputation came before her across the galaxy, like the shockwave from an exploding star. She had ended the Century War with a single negotiation that left 3 species in her debt. She had personally led the evacuation of the Kepler colonies when their star went supernova, organizing the rescue of 40 billion beings in less than 72 hours. She had made trade agreements that brought wealth to worlds that had known only poverty, and her justice was both fast and absolute. But she was also a mother who had spent the last 6 hours believing her daughter might be dead, or worse, disappeared into the maze-like underworld of a station whose security she had trusted completely. The combination of motherly fear changed into protective rage, and imperial authority was terrifying to see, a force of nature that made hurricanes seem gentle by comparison. "Your Majesty," Veltar gasped, his voice barely a whisper that somehow carried in the complete silence that had fallen over the marketplace. His earlier pride had been replaced by something approaching existential terror, as he realized that his easy cruelty had targeted the daughter of the most powerful being in known space. We had no idea. The child didn't identify herself. We would never have. The excuses died in his throat as the Queen's look settled on him with the weight of star gravity. Her eyes were ancient beyond mortal understanding, holding depths that spoke of civilizations risen and fallen, of decisions that had shaped the evolution of entire species. When she looked at someone, they understood instinctively that they were being judged by standards beyond their ability to understand. "Silence," the Queen commanded, and the word carried such authority that even the station's air processors seemed to pause in respect. The very concept of sound seemed to bend to her will, creating a zone of absolute quiet that extended far beyond the marketplace into the station's hallways and rooms. She moved toward Marcus and Zara with steps that seemed to make the deck floor sing, each footfall creating echoes that traveled through the station structure like the heartbeat of some vast living thing. Her presence was so overwhelming that reality itself seemed to struggle to contain her, space warping and shifting around her huge form in ways that hurt to look at directly. The crowd parted before her like a tide in reverse, beings scrambling to clear a path for her. Some pressed themselves against walls or behind pillars, while others simply fled the marketplace entirely, unable to cope with being close to such concentrated power. Those who remained did so more from paralysis than courage, frozen like prey animals, hoping that stillness might somehow make them invisible to a predator beyond their understanding. Marcus had stood up but made no move to bow or grovel. Instead, he gently placed a protective hand on Zara's shoulder, ready to defend her, even against odds that would make quantum computers weep in despair. His stance was unconsciously protective, his body positioned between the approaching Queen and her daughter, in a gesture so instinctive that it spoke to depths of character that no amount of social training could teach. The Queen stopped before them, her ancient eyes studying Marcus with an intensity that seemed to peer into his very soul, cataloging every thought and motivation with the precision of a cosmic scanner. For a moment that seemed to stretch across geologic time periods, the entire universe held its breath, waiting to see what judgment would fall from the lips of the most powerful being in 7 star systems. The silence was absolute, more complete than the vacuum between galaxies. Even the normally constant background hum of the station's systems had somehow been muted, as if the very technology that kept them alive had paused out of respect for the moment. In that silence, possibilities hung like quantum states, waiting to collapse into reality. The future balanced on the edge of a single word. "You fed my daughter," she said finally, her voice softer now but no less powerful, carrying undertones that spoke of gratitude older than language itself. "She was hungry," Marcus replied simply, his voice steady despite the cosmic forces in front of him. There was no false modesty in his tone, no attempt to minimize or make bigger his actions. He spoke with the simple honesty that had driven him to share his sandwich in the first place. Any decent being would have done the same. A sound escaped the Queen's lips that might have been laughter, or might have been something far more complex. The sound of a mother's heart recognizing true nobility in the most unexpected place of an empress, discovering that the universe still contained surprises capable of moving her ancient soul. Any decent being. Yes, she agreed, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to make the very air shimmer with meaning. But as we have seen today, decency is rarer than you suppose. Rarer than quantum crystals, more precious than time itself, more valuable than all the treasures of my empire. She turned to address the cowering nobles, her voice carrying to every corner of the marketplace and beyond, transmitting across the station's communication networks to reach every being aboard. The words would be recorded, saved and studied for generations, becoming part of the historical record that defined entire ages of galactic civilization. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that Marcus Chen of Earth has shown more nobility in a single act than all of your bloodlines, combined across centuries of existence, she declared, her voice carrying the weight of imperial decree and the authority to reshape laws with a word. He shall be granted full citizenship of Zerion Station with all privileges therein, and the protection of the Dramath Empire, for the remainder of his days and those of his descendants, unto the 7th generation. The announcement hit the marketplace like a physical force, each word carrying legal and social meanings that would ripple through diplomatic channels for years to come. Marcus Chen, repair worker 3rd class, had just been elevated to a status that most rich people could only dream of achieving, protected by the most powerful military force in known space, and granted rights that went beyond planet boundaries. And as they walked away together, the Queen, her daughter, and the human who had reminded the universe what kindness truly meant, no one dared laugh again, for they finally understood what they had witnessed. Not just an act of compassion, but the moment when the galaxy remembered that true nobility had nothing to do with birth or wealth, and everything to do with the courage to care for strangers. 3 months later, the Zerion Station cultural agreements were signed in the very marketplace where a simple sandwich had changed everything. The ceremony took place at the exact spot where Marcus had knelt to offer food to a hungry child, now marked by a crystal monument that sang with harmonic frequencies whenever acts of kindness happened nearby. The new laws established the dignity rules, making sure that all beings aboard the station, no matter their species, social standing, or money status, would be treated with basic respect. Representatives from 47 worlds attended the signing ceremony, their diverse forms creating a tapestry of galactic unity that would have been impossible just months before. The Andorian ambassador wept tears of liquid silver as she put her seal on the document, while the crystal delegate from Zerion Prime echoed with frequencies of deep gratitude. Even the mysterious representatives from the void reaches, beings who communicated through controlled gravity waves, participated in the historic moment. Marcus Chen was appointed as the first human cultural liaison, his repair uniform replaced with robes of honor woven from stellar silk that had been spun in the heart of a neutron star. The fabric itself seemed to hold starlight, shifting and shimmering with patterns that told the story of his transformation from forgotten worker to galactic diplomat. But more important than his new position was the friendship that had blossomed between him and young Zara, who visited the station regularly with her mother to make sure the new rules were being followed, and to share countless meals that had become legendary throughout the diplomatic community. The Dragon Girl had learned something precious that day in the marketplace. That family wasn't always about blood or species, but about the connections made in moments of shared vulnerability and unconditional kindness. She had grown stronger in the months since their first meeting, her scales now showing the healthy emerald brightness that marked proper nutrition and emotional well-being among her people. But more than physical health, she had gained something infinitely more valuable, the knowledge that she was seen, valued, and loved by beings who had chosen to care about her welfare. Marcus had discovered that sometimes the most profound changes in the universe began with the simplest gestures. That individual choices could create ripples that spread across space and time to touch lives on worlds he would never visit. His daughter Sarah had joined him on Zerion Station, her eyes wide with wonder at the marvels of galactic civilization, but prouder still of her father's role in creating a kinder universe. The scholarship funds, established in Marcus's name, had already changed the lives of thousands of young beings from disadvantaged backgrounds, making sure that talent and curiosity would never again be wasted due to circumstances of birth. Queen Lyrali, watching her daughter laugh as she shared another meal with her human friend, felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries of rule. Hope that went beyond political calculation. Hope that her empire, built on strength and maintained through power, might evolve into something greater. Something built on the radical foundation of compassion that could unite rather than divide. That could create rather than just conquer. Her advisors had initially been skeptical of the changes Marcus's example had inspired throughout the empire, but the results spoke for themselves. Productivity increased when workers felt valued. Creativity flourished when different perspectives were welcomed, and conflicts solved themselves more easily. When empathy replaced exploitation as the default way of interacting. The story of the human who shared his sandwich with a crying dragon girl spread across the galaxy like ripples in the cosmic web, inspiring similar acts of kindness on worlds from the Andromeda Spiral to the Edge systems. Peace negotiations that had stalled for decades suddenly found new momentum as diplomats remembered that their differences were far less important than their shared capacity for empathy. Trade disputes solved themselves as beings chose cooperation over competition. Understanding that wealth shared was wealth multiplied, children across the galaxy went to sleep each night hearing the story of Marcus and Zara, learning that heroism didn't require superpowers or ancient weapons. Sometimes it only required the courage to care about someone who was different, someone who was suffering, someone who had been forgotten by the rest of the universe. In the end, Marcus Chen returned to his modest home that night, now considerably more luxurious, but still chosen for comfort rather than show, with the same simple contentment he'd always carried. But now the universe itself had shifted slightly on its axis. The stars sang a little brighter. The space between worlds felt a little less empty. And somewhere in the vast darkness, new stories were being born from the seeds of an old truth that had been waiting patiently for someone to remember its power. In a universe built on power and division, sometimes a single act of dignity is enough to remind the stars themselves what they were truly meant to illuminate. Not the darkness between us, but the light that connects us all. The invisible threads of compassion that bind every conscious being in a web of shared destiny and infinite possibility.